pointing at. When I was in elementary school, we had a class camp at a youth home by the sea. After the test of courage, which consisted of a walk to a nearby shrine and back, the time came when all we had to do was go to bed. Perhaps it was because of the strange tension we felt immediately after the frightening experience, we gathered in a group of 8 people, both boys and girls, in a common room at the back of the building on the first floor. Lights had gone out only a few minutes before, so there was still a chance that the teacher would come to check on us, but we were resigned to the fact that if he found us, that would be the time to do it. Because one of them was good at telling ghost stories. He was usually inconspicuous, but he had an unexpected talent, or perhaps it was just the way his scary stories were told, combined with his halting narration, that created a strange atmosphere. We listened to his words with rapt attention. Or should I say that we could not leave the room? The tatami-matted common room was lined with short bookshelves against the wall, and our shadows swayed as we sat in a circle on the bookshelves. In the center of the circle, he was holding a candle. He was usually absent from gym class, pale-faced and still in the corner of the classroom, but at that moment he dominated us. No one suggested that we go to bed. We were afraid of being told to go back to our rooms alone. The conversation went on in a casual manner, and I could see the girls' faces gradually getting tougher and tougher. The boy was half-heartedly urging me to hurry up and tell the next story, but I was sure he was also fooling himself to replace his fear with curiosity. With a huff, the conversation broke off and there was silence in the room. He raised his hand as if to take a break, sipped from a water bottle he had brought with him, and moved his throat. Someone sniffed, and a chain of sniffs and sniffs drifted through the quiet common room. One of the boys, perhaps unable to stand the atmosphere, said in a forcibly cheerful tone, "Let's play a game like this. Let's play a game like this." They all closed their eyes and point at the same time where the ghost might be right now. The boy and the girl were puzzled when he said this, but they were compelled to do it when he said, "That sounds fun. Then, crush it." The boy who started it all said so, and I closed my eyes in disgust. Suddenly my heart beat louder. "Did you point already?" I heard his voice, and I hurriedly pointed my finger at the appropriate place. It wasn't that I felt where I might be. It was just that I felt that it was better not to try to feel it. I heard a voice telling me to open my eyes, and I opened them fearfully. There was a short scream of cackling. Almost everyone was pointing to different places, though. 2 of the girls were pointing in almost the same direction. "Oh no," he tried to joke around, but I could hear his voice trembling. "Next story," he said, his shoulders thrust out a little. We move our faces closer to the candlelight. The car seat gets smaller. His chilling story begins again, and somehow it ends in a strange reverberation. I can hear the faint sound of an exhale at each length. "Let's point out where the ghosts might be again," the same boy said. "Oh, okay," another boy says, closing his eyes. Everyone else closed their eyes as well. At least I was afraid to open my eyes. "Then open your eyes." When I opened my eyes, I saw a male-female pair pointing in the same direction. I involuntarily looked away from the white wall. I was afraid I would see something. After that, every time he told one more story, this inspirational experiment-like game was played. Even the person who initiated the game looked as if his blood was running cold. But no one said anything about stopping. It seemed that everyone was trapped in a loop of repetition from which there was no escape. And eventually you begin to notice. The direction of the finger pointing is becoming more and more aligned. Every time you open your eyes, you hear a gasp, and everyone's eyes turn in that direction. This time, all 4 of them were pointing at the window in almost the same direction. Thick curtains were drawn so that no one could see out. They probably couldn't see the small light of the candles from outside either. Someone let out an embarrassed laugh. No one made any attempt to look out the window or behind the curtains. Everyone just looked away awkwardly. "Next story," he said quietly again. As soon as he began to speak, I realized that it was different from the ghost stories I had heard before. It was about a group of children who gathered in the middle of the night and played a pointing game to guess where the spirits were. It sounded like it was about us. As the story progresses through 1 or 2 episodes, the fingers gradually begin to align. 2, 3, 4, 5. And when the last story was over, all the fingers pointed to the same place. That's where his story ended. It should have been, but everyone did not exhale. The rest of the story was about to begin. "Close your eyes," he said. No one could resist. Before me, only the flickering of the candles remained like a shimmer in the darkness. There is a feeling that every direction of the common room, where we are sitting round as if we are sinking into it, is moving squishily. I had a feeling that no matter where I pointed, I would end up pointing to a very unpleasant place. Shakily, my hands move. "Open your eyes," I heard a voice say from the darkness. And then we saw that we were all pointing in the same direction. It was the spring of my freshman year of college. I was visiting a haunted place alone with a senior whom I had befriended early in my college career. The man had a bewitching knowledge that I, who loved ghost stories, was not at all a match for. He was a monster, and I called him my master and followed him everywhere he went. There are some things in this world that can't be explained, aren't there? A small lamp illuminated our faces in the darkness as the call of mountain pigeons came from beyond. After listening to my tale of my special experience, the master muttered a few words, nodded his head, and stopped responding. The more he didn't say anything, the more scared I became. The place where I am now is a prefab hut that looks abandoned, which I finally reach after climbing up a winding mountain path away from the human village. It was in disarray, with what appeared to be various materials scattered about, but it was spacious inside. I dusted off the blue sheet and sat on it, but the empty space stuck to the outside of my body, making me feel irresistibly cold. I wondered how he could do such a crazy thing as sitting in a haunted place and telling ghost stories. I felt strange even while we were talking. There were only 2 people in the room, but I felt as if there were more people listening in. "I guess you've never played that pointing game before, have you?" Finally, the master opened his mouth. "Yes. Maybe everyone else, too." "What about it?" The master's mouth relaxed as his eyes narrowed. "I'll tell you where they all pointed at the end." I was surprised. At the same time, I knew there was no way I could tell, since he hadn't described the details of what was going on in that common room. "I can tell just from what you say." The master said it as if it were a matter of course. I was a little nervous. How could I possibly know? But in the eerie atmosphere of the prefab hut at night, my certainty is shaken. I listen to the sound of small insects flying around the lamp and stare at the faces that emerge in the darkness. They all pointed at him who told them that ghost story. The master pointed his finger at the area between my eyebrows, and then inserted it into his hand as if to hide it. I'd like to say, he's the one who told me the ghost story, but no, he continues. You've never tried to play that game seriously. You have never tried to play that game seriously, because you are too afraid to look for signs of spirits. Rather, you are afraid that your finger would point to such a place. If you point in the same direction as others, you will be afraid that there really is a spirit there. That's what he thinks. So, on the contrary, it is not hard to imagine that they become obsessed with the idea that they have to point to a place where there is nothing. And that became the common consciousness of everyone there as the game progressed. The master's words were filled with a mysterious confidence that never wavered. After the first time the two girls' fingers came together, they probably thought, I'm too scared to come together that way again. After the first time the girls' fingers were aligned, they probably thought, it's too scary to align them in that direction again. So they consciously or unconsciously avoided that direction. And perhaps another boy and another girl happened to align their fingers in a completely different direction, for example, in the opposite direction. And people think, oh, no, not there either. And the number of directions to point fingers will decrease. The probability of the next finger being aligned naturally increases. The more you repeat it, the better. The master looked around the prefab hut, running his fingers through the air as if he were writing a letter. And then he begins to tell a ghost story that is very similar to the situation we are in now. This is foul. No matter how scary it is still a story. The filter that says, "It's just a story," is removed, and the ghost story begins to invade reality. The children's minds were filled with fear, no doubt. Then, a single obsession took over: next time, never point in the same direction as someone else. Next time, don't ever point in the same direction as the others. And moreover, we must never all point at the same place, which is the end of the ghost story he told us. The master lowered his finger and hung his head as it was. So we all kept our eyes closed and thought. A place where absolutely no one else would point. A place where there would never be a spirit in that direction. A place where it would never occur to me that there might be one. Suddenly, I felt a chill. I'm not sure how the master would know. The common room was on the ground floor. So, the master looked up, stuck out his right hand, and slowly pointed his index finger directly down. They all pointed down. The moment I heard those words, a vivid memory came back to my mind. Screams of girls. The screams of boys. The sound of footsteps running away from nowhere. When all fingers pointed downward, I thought I heard a strange screeching voice in my ear. It was as if a heavy, cold liquid had been poured down my back. Anyway, I tried to get away from the place and bumped into someone. As I fell, I saw him stiffen in front of the candle with a look of astonishment on his face. Soon several people ran out of the common room screaming, and the teacher heard the commotion and came running in his nightgown. We were all very angry and received one slap each. One in particular, who had brought in a candle, was carried off to the teacher's room. His calm demeanor when he was telling us ghost stories was gone, and he cried out, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." You understood. That's all I could say. Once again, I thought he was a great guy. Perhaps everyone's fingers were strictly disparate. Somewhere directly under themselves or on the tatami. In any case, I don't think they were aligned in such a way that more than two had pointed in the same direction by then. But when I opened my eyes and looked in the direction the other children's fingers were pointing, everyone's consciousness recognized only that symbol, down. I realized this when he pointed this out to me. It is true that the fingers were not aligned. But we were under the illusion that they were aligned. That game was terrible for a child with so many assumptions. The master laughed only with his mouth. I rubbed my left arm and shrugged my shoulders. I had never imagined that such a psychological trick was hidden in that terrifying experience. I suddenly felt a slight tug in my head. Huh? If so, that's strange. Didn't he say, there are things in this world that cannot be explained? After he finished listening to me, he did indeed say that. But right after that, there was a brilliant psychological explanation. It sounded like he had swallowed everything at that moment. It was all so easy. Who said I meant the punchline of the story? The master slowly exhaled. At that moment, I felt a thrill run through my skin. The master began, craning his neck in the faint light of the lamp and gazing at the four corners of the hut, where cobwebs were covering it like smoke. It used to be a materials yard for a bankrupt construction company, he said. I haven't told you how it became a haunted place. Well, to put it simply, the president of the company hanged himself here. He wrapped his tie around the pillar there. I point the lamp in that direction. I winced as if I had seen something horrifying. After that, there was a rumor that if you passed by the hut in the middle of the night, you would see someone standing inside the window. The figure behind the window had an unusually long neck. It is said that the dead president of the company has become a spirit bound to the earth and is still wandering around inside this prefab hut. However, the master paused for a beat. If we trace the reason for the president's hanging, we come up against another interesting rumor. With a clank, He put down the lamp and stood up. He got out of the blue sheet and began to walk in circles on the ground. The reason the construction company went bankrupt was that it had run out of cash and had to dishonor a bill. What put a damper on the company's cash flow was that it won a local government public works project that began with a sloppy design and was awarded at just the minimum bidding price. As long as the project was carried out according to the design, the construction period would be delayed, and the cash flow would visibly stagnate as the company repeatedly argued with the local government officials. The company managed to complete the construction and received payment from the municipality, but by that time, the company's footing as a construction company was in tatters. And a year later, the company went bankrupt. Actually, it was during that public works project that an incident occurred. Pitter-patteringly, the master stops. It was when they were digging up the ground for the foundation work. The foreman and some workers found what appeared to be some kind of artifact under the soil. Normally, those who find such artifacts as shell mounds or remains of ancient people are obliged to report them to the Board of Education. However, this is a problem for construction companies, which have no choice but to suspend construction work until all the investigations are completed, and in some cases, the construction work itself may be halted. For small and medium-sized construction companies, this is a matter of life and death. Therefore, when the president received the report from the site supervisor, he instructed him to conceal the fact that artifacts had been discovered. The excavated relics were then secretly taken to another location and reburied. Of course, it was on the private property of the construction company. Soon after, a prefabricated hut was erected on the land as if to cover it up. It was used as a materials yard, but the construction company eventually went bankrupt. The president of the company hangs himself there and dies, in other words, here. The master said quietly. The airflow had changed slightly, and I could smell the rotten smell wafting from a bundle of straw pinched in the corner of the hut. A chill crept up from beneath my feet. What in the world was it that they had dug up? The rumors themselves were whispered secretly among former employees of the construction company, who had heard them from the workers who operated the construction equipment. However, it is rumored that both the bankruptcy of the company and the death of the president may have been caused by the curse of the relic. They say it was because he found something that should not have been found and did such a terrible thing as burying it again. That the president was hanged not at the head office or any other facility, but at a materials yard deep in the mountains. That alone is a fateful coincidence, isn't it? The master stood by the pillar and patted it. It's the pillar around which the president wrapped his tie. And the fact that the president's spirit is still trapped here is also unfathomable, like a dark gravity. My ears have been ringing, getting further and further away from me. I cover my ears and try my hardest to scream, but I still can't look away from the master's mouth. Something rises up. Something invisible. You went out of your way to tell a ghost story with no particular subject, but you did tell a story from your elementary school days, when you hadn't heard any stories about this prefab hut. As if by choice. So I said. There are things in this world that cannot be explained. Without a footstep, the master sat down again in front of me. Now, let's close our eyes and point. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.